Hello and welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by Ben from WhoScored and Jonathan Wilson to talk through the Premier League action that's coming up this weekend. It's Thursday at the time of recording, so a couple of Premier League games haven't happened, but there's been a few games already that we can touch on briefly before we get into the weekend. Ben, and Liverpool last night, another win, 1-0. Darwin Núñez looked lively for the time he was on the pitch. He was bright. 3-3, I think he scored now. He's coming good, isn't he?
Yeah, it's must be a welcome reprieve for Klopp to see that his big money strikers now actually starting to get the goals. Doesn't lack the confidence at all. I mean, you can see the amount of shots that he had. He had 6 last night and scored the one in the 57 minutes he was on the pitch. So, I mean, it looks like it's starting to click for him, which is kind of ideal timing for Liverpool. They still don't have a midfield, so if he can get the goals, then that should be a huge boost for them.
Yeah, and they're picking up all kinds of injuries as well, Jonathan, but 2 clean sheets in a row as well, which after the way they've been defending is probably huge.
Yeah, I mean, they got away with it slightly against West Ham, obviously with the penalty, but beyond that, I thought they were significantly the better side. I think it'll be the defensive performance against City that'll please them more than last night. But Núñez, I have to say, I'm still sort of a bit perplexed by him. So even against City, even though you missed those or wasted those 3 1-on-1s late on, what I would say is he somehow attracted the ball, caused things to happen. And it was a point that the Irish journalist Ken Early made to me that it looked terrible him missing those 3 chances, particularly the fact that on 2 of them, he just chose the wrong option, and the other one, like one of the worst attempts to chip a ball I've seen this side of Jeff Whitley. But in the time he was on the pitch, Erling Haaland touched the ball 3 times, and one of those was a kickoff. So which would you rather have? The bloke failing silently or the bloke failing really, really noisily? And I think there's a clumsiness about Núñez.
Yeah, I thought that.
Which it may be that he hits a patch of form and that disappears. And I guess you can say it's not quite the same, but in terms of build, he and Haaland are not dissimilar strikers. But he has not hidden at all. Every game he's played, he's been massively involved in, for better and often for worse. And I think that, I mean, there's a danger of he goes a bit Timo Werner. But you just sort of sense things are happening when he's there, and I think that's not a bad quality to have. And you're quite apart from the goal, which is a brilliant header. There was that volley that hit the post, but he does seem to be somebody who's better when the ball's in the air. He's a really good volleyer of the ball, but he seems to scuff it when it's on the ground. So I guess they just got to give him more volley chances. And I think the other question you'd have about him is, if they are going to play that 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2, whatever you want to call it, do he and Salah work well together, or would you rather have Firmino dropping deep and creating space for Salah? So that's still the question. But I think after Sunday, it's probably a good thing that Núñez played so well so soon afterwards.
Yeah, and obviously the 6 points for Liverpool, massive if they are to get themselves back into contention for the title. Ben, the biggest talking point from Wednesday night's game came right at the end when Cristiano Ronaldo decided he couldn't wait that extra couple of minutes and had to make a scene and storm down the tunnel. What did you make of that?
It's pathetic, for want of a better word. His team are 2-0 up. They're playing incredible football, probably the best United have played in years. And obviously they're doing it without him, and he just decides to make it all about himself again by storming down the tunnel. We know that he doesn't really want to be there now. Ten Hag is a bit apprehensive about using him, which is fair enough because he wants to stamp in his own system. But just to act like that when your team are beating a good Tottenham team is pathetic. But pathetic.
Do you think it's because he didn't get on at all, or it's an overall thing of the last 3 to 4 months, Jonathan? Because I mean, in all fairness, they're 2-0 up in a game like that. They're probably not going to bring him on, are they? It would be unnecessary to bring him on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe we're being harsh on him. He's getting on a bit. Maybe maybe his bladder's just not as strong as it used to be. Maybe he just have to go.
Sometimes, I can tell you, I'm a similar age. That can happen now.
Yeah, I mean, I very rarely make it through a night now. That's the downside of modern football and players being able to go on longer. That maybe we need to make halves shorter, so that they don't have that pressure on their bladder, which I think must be very uncomfortable, especially in public view like that. But if it isn't that, then I mean, yeah, that's United's best performance in a long, long time. I guess. But I guess answer to your question is you're not going to bring him on at 2-0. Well, you're not going to bring him on at 4-0 down. We just found out at the City game. You're not going to bring him on when you're 2-0 up. What's the moment when you do bring him on? Like when it's level? Like is that the only time he's got to function now to come on with 10 minutes to go to maybe nick a header from a corner? I mean, that's a pretty rapid demotion. But yeah, United should never have signed him. They should have done everything they could to get rid of him in the summer, and I'm sure now they will do everything to get rid of him. But it is the problem of bringing him in. Whichever club you are, doesn't matter how big a club you are, you become FC Ronaldo when he joins you, and he will always be the story. So that performance, which, as I say, is as good as I've seen United play in, well, certainly well over a year, is overshadowed by another Ronaldo story.
Yeah, well, let's look a little bit more at Manchester United. They travelled to Stamford Bridge to play Chelsea this weekend, and I saw firsthand Jonathan Mason Mount this weekend, shining since Graham Potter took over. A couple of goals, his first goals of the season at Villa Park, and he's just quite a unique player because he's got a little bit of everything as a midfielder. He's so lively, he never stops running, both going forwards and going backwards, and he's a good player despite some criticism that he does get.
Yeah, I don't really understand the criticism. I guess it's because he's not necessarily sort of flashy, but managers clearly love him. Every manager he's worked for, Lampard, Southgate, Tuchel, they've all loved him as well. They talk about him being a tactically incredibly astute player, which is something I think, when you don't know what the tactical plan is, for sort of lay people just watching the game, not analysing it, can be difficult to pick up. But yeah, he got 2 assists against Wolves, the 2 goals against Villa, got the assist against Milan, got the goal against Germany for England. So whatever little dip that was he had at the beginning of the season, that's over, and he's back to his best. Now, whether that is Potter giving him more freedom than Tuchel gave him, whether it is just that, like so many of those players who played for England in June, he was knackered. I don't know, but yeah, he's back to his best now, which at a time when most of the news for England heading into the World Cup is pretty negative, I think could be a huge positive.
Yeah, a boost for England that he's coming into form at the right time, Ben. And playing under Potter now, I mean, he changes formation a lot through the game. And Jonathan mentions how tactically astute Mount is. A player like that will be important for Chelsea because I think he played 2 or 3 different positions against Villa on Sunday.
Yeah, you look at kind of how Potter used Pascal Gross in kind of a similar setup. Not similar setup per se, but Gross had this kind of versatility to play anywhere across the attack and even at right wing back once or twice. And Mason Mount has that kind of same versatility, but can give you a very good 8 out of 10 performance each time because he is just that tactically, like, he's basically a peg that will fit in every hole essentially on that front line, which is perfect for Potterball.
Yeah, so switched on, such a good player, and someone who unfortunately was switched on Sunday. Probably had the best game he's ever had in a Chelsea shirt. Jonathan Kepa, it was a pleasure for me to see him have that game against Aston Villa. I think he made 6 or 7 saves. He made about 3 saves, 4 saves in one attack. He's looking like the undisputed number 1 now. Yeah,
I'd say he is. The one thing you'd slightly question, I think Chelsea are in a rare position where they've got 2 very good goalkeepers. There's not an obvious hierarchy there. On form, I agree, Kepa looks brilliant. Whether against more physical teams, so maybe even against Brentford on Wednesday night, maybe there's an argument to play Mendy as being better at dealing with crosses. But Kepa's shot stopping at the minute is sensational, and I'm sure he will play against United, and rightly so. And it's good, I think it's very easy for us to. A player comes in for a big fee, he has a slightly difficult start, and then you write him off. Well, Kepa's obviously a good goalkeeper. He might not necessarily be the right fit for Chelsea, but to write him off immediately, I think it's a sort of tendency in modern football, and maybe this is proof that occasionally we should be a bit more patient.
A good thing for Potter as well, I suppose, Jonathan, because he's kind of landed on it because he was forced to do it when he came in because Mendy was injured, and sometimes as a manager you need that little bit of luck. But just Potter's such a good manager as well.
Yeah, Mendy's form had deteriorated, and I guess that would then be a big call to say this has deteriorated so far. We're bringing in the other guy. The injury does make it easy for him to do that. But yeah, Potter does. I mean, you look back at some of the stuff he did at Östersund when they're putting on performances of Swan Lake and things, all about sort of personal development. And I'm not suggesting he's going to start putting on ballets at Stamford Bridge, but he's clearly very aware of ways you create squad togetherness, ways you can get players to develop. And I'm not aware at any of the 4 clubs he's been at, or even with that stint he had with the Ghana women's team or with Hull University or anything like that, of him ever falling out with anybody. So that suggests a real sort of emotional intelligence, which I wonder whether in modern football that's becoming slightly rarer, that it's so focused on systems and getting the organisation right that maybe that capacity to motivate players is becoming slightly undervalued. I mean, Klopp clearly has it, but maybe that is a string to Potter's bow that a lot of other top coaches don't have.
Yeah, I know they drew 0-0 on Wednesday night, Ben, but Potter also, about keeping people happy, he's literally getting everyone involved at the moment because the team's changing so much on a game-to-game basis. Pretty much everyone is getting football at the moment.
Yeah, and that's the good thing about Potter is he was quite unpredictable to pick his ideal 11 each week at Brighton because he would keep chopping and changing. And as Jonathan said, he's never really annoyed anyone. He's never gotten anyone's bad books. He seems just a very likable character, and the fact that he's bringing all the Chelsea players in, they do have a very inflated squad, means he's keeping everyone in the good books. And if you keep everyone in the good books, they'll play for the manager, and it has a very positive effect on how the team plays as a whole.
Yeah, he's getting the results as well, unbeaten so far since he's gone in at Chelsea. And Ben, Josh has left for pastures new, but he did leave us with a poor parting gift, I'm going to say now, because he had a few criticisms of Bruno Fernandes, but then Bruno Fernandes went on to have, he's probably one of his best games he's had in a long time for Manchester United last night. And all of Josh's criticisms, they weren't true last night.
Yeah, this is the kind of the Fernandes of old that we've seen in United shirt. It's the one that looked at his best when he first signed. He took the Premier League by storm in that second half of that season when he arrived in January 2019 or 2020. I can't remember which one.
Neither can I.
He made
2020. I'm going to say.
I think it was 2020. It was just before COVID, I believe.
Yeah.
And he made 9 key passes last night against Tottenham, which is a very good feat. It was the most in a Premier League match this season, and I think the most since the start of last season, where Fernandes actually made 10 key passes against Villa. At first, there was the criticism of giving him the 4-year contract before Ten Hag had officially joined. I mean, Merson said, "Why would you do that for a player who the manager might not like?" And initially, he kind of felt as though Merson would be proved right, but then last night was one of those instances where Fernandes is at his just brilliant best in the final third. I mean, there's still criticisms to be made about his overall distribution. He might not make the right pass and he might get a bit annoyed with teammates. But when he's playing as he did last night, there's absolutely no reason to drop him.
Yeah, I mean, the commentator on I was watching it on Amazon last night, Jonathan, they kind of said, I think it was he threw it to Alan Shearer, that Fernandes just looks freer when Ronaldo's not playing. He doesn't look as, I don't know what the word is, like bogged down when Ronaldo's on the pitch. And he did take that game by the scruff of the neck last night, was a real leader. He's the captain at the moment on the football pitch when Maguire's not there. And he was just so good last night.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an issue Portugal have got as well, that what do you do with an aging Ronaldo who clearly does inhibit the team? I wonder as well whether that Casemiro-Fred pairing at the back of midfield provided a platform for him. That Christian Eriksen is clearly a brilliant footballer, but maybe playing him deep in midfield doesn't quite give you the defensive security you might like. And that Casemiro-Fred pairing, it is Brazil's first choice pairing, and they go in the World Cup as favourites. So it's not something that that sounds natural yet, but it's been working for Chiche in Brazil. So you think, well, why wouldn't that work, at least in the short term for United? So yeah, absence of Ronaldo, presence of those two, possibly that is the environment that Fernandes needs. Because Josh's criticism, I think, was entirely valid. I think Fernandes has been ponderous at times this season, but he was superb last night.
Yeah, it did just all seem to click into gear last night, Jonathan. And although he didn't score, Marcus Rashford playing centrally, he led the line very well as well. Stretched the Tottenham defence and freed up space for others with some of his movement. I mean, I don't know how he hasn't scored in the game last night. Lloris had a good game, to be fair to him. But even just Rashford leading that line last night, he didn't score, but it was so effective for them.
Yeah, I mean, there were good performances everywhere. I think Diego Dalot as well. That's probably as well as I've seen him play in the United shirt. So yeah, I think the forward line is. Look, I think the team as a whole is a long way from what Ten Hag would envisage in the long term. But the forward line, I think you are starting to see a little bit of the fluency and the interchanges that he would want. I think that helps Fernandes as well. You know, if a players in front of him are moving in ways that facilitate him to pass the ball quicker, then obviously that ponderousness will go. So last night was the first time I sort of thought, actually, this might not just be a team that scrapes into fourth, but it might be a team that it's probably not this season, but next season, with another year of development, maybe 2 or 3 more players coming in, a couple of the slower, older players being phased out, maybe they could be outside title challengers.
It's interesting you say about the Casemiro and Fred partnership, because I thought that worked very well last night as well. But
Fred was brilliant.
Yeah, but Eriksen kind of needs to be in the team. And if he's not playing in one of those deep midfield positions, where's he playing? You
can play him in the Fernandes role when Fernandes isn't there. And given the nature of his schedule, rotation is even more essential than it usually is. So, just to put in mind how crazy the schedule is, if this was a normal World Cup season, last weekend would have been the final round of Premier League fixtures. This weekend would be the FA Cup final. So most players, and then obviously you'd have the Champions League final after that, but most players would have finished last weekend to have a month of preparation for the World Cup. And we've got 3 more rounds of Premier League fixtures after this weekend, plus 2 Champions League, plus a League Cup. So, the schedule is absurd. So having 2 players for one position, I think this season of all seasons isn't really a problem anymore.
I've not looked at it like that. That's an interesting viewpoint, Jonathan. And Ben, just to finish on this game, if you had to put money on one of these teams finishing in the top 4, which one would it be?
Oh, you put me on the spot there.
I have.
If they play like they did last night, Man United, but then obviously it's an isolated incident per se, and that's the kind of the first time we've seen them in the Ten Hag sort of mould. I would probably say United, just because Chelsea have the injury issues in midfield that could sort of impair them further down the line. Obviously, we've got the World Cup, so there'll be players that aren't going to have time to recuperate. But I think it might be that United just pip it to 4th if push comes to shove. It'd be United ahead of Chelsea, in my opinion.
I think at the minute probably both will. I think Tottenham could easily fall out.
Okay.
But if you ask me who I think will finish higher, I'd probably still just go Chelsea. Partly because they have a small lead already, and partly, they haven't lost under Potter. So I think United's squad, in a couple of injuries in certain areas, particularly the forward line, I think could look pretty thin pretty quickly.
And your score prediction, please, Jonathan?
1-1.
1-1. Ben?
Yeah, 1-1 as well.
1-1 as well. I want to go big. Well, not big, because I'm not predicting loads of goals there. I think Manchester United might win 2-1. I watched Villa get at Chelsea very heavily and not score. I think they can be got at, and I think Manchester United will do that, but they'll probably score goals as well. So yeah, I'm going to go 2-1 to Manchester United. Next up, we're going to look at Tottenham v Newcastle, Jonathan, and there's been a lot of people shouting for Spurs with this 3-5-2. They played it last night against Manchester United. The hand was forced a little bit because they didn't have Richarlison and they didn't have Kulusevski. But I would say, and I was saying to you before we came on, I think when they play that 3-5-2, there's an alarming lack of creativity in that side. There's suddenly a lot on Harry Kane to make things happen with his passing.
I think that's also true in the 3-4-3. I think creativity is the big problem that Tottenham have. I think that's why Kulusevski looks so important to them, because he is the player who links that forward line to the midfield. And to an extent, if he's playing there, that 3-4-3 is sort of a 3-4.5, 2.5, and that just feels much better balanced. I think there's a real danger that whether it's a front two or front three without Kulusevski becoming a bit detached. And that A, makes it harder to get the ball to them, but B, it also means that there's a huge amount of pressure on the two centre midfielders if it is a 3-4-3. So, I think that's been the disappointment with them this season, that they just look a bit predictable through midfield. And I'm not really sure why that's changed from the end of last season, apart from the absence recently of Kulusevski.
Yeah, Højbjerg has been on the score sheet in recent games. Ben, you're a Spurs fan. What do you make of their setup at the moment? I mean, that they were not a good watch last night. I was surprised with actually how bad they were.
Yeah, I think a lot of Tottenham fans, I know a lot were pining for 3-5-2, myself included. Spurs have looked better in a 3-5-2 against Leicester and against Everton, and Brighton. They put in that solid performance to get that 1-0 win. But last night, it just felt like they were a bit overawed by the occasion. You look at Basuma, every second touch he made was a tackle, essentially, because his first one was that poor that he had to go and win it back again. It's difficult because the 3-5-2 gives you it should in theory give you great protection of the defence, but that wasn't the case last night. The 3-4-3 does look a bit open in the middle of the park with Højbjerg and Bentancur. And again, as Jonathan said, without Kulusevski, it doesn't really work as well as it should, because Richarlison is a good signing, a very good signing for Tottenham. He offers that versatility on the front line, is covered for all three positions, but he doesn't have that same guard as Kulusevski does to get on the ball, get his head up and pick a pass. There's an argument to be made that Kulusevski could play in theory in that number 10 role and sort of move to 3-4-1-2, but it's a tough one at the moment, because Conte was saying that he can play 3-4-3 and he put Lucas Moura in there, but Lucas Moura doesn't really offer much. But then he moved to the 3-5-2, and you could argue that he feels justified that he wants to stick to the 3-4-3 because 3-5-2 didn't work at all last night. Yeah,
the three in central midfield, Jonathan, they're all kind of doing the same job. They're similar players in a lot of ways for me. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah, I think so. There's no sort of Eriksen figure. There's nobody who's necessarily going to unpick the lock. So it then, the creativity comes very much about winning the ball back. And I know Conte hates the word countering, but attacking in transition maybe is the best way of putting it. And that's fine up to a point, but I think it is why Tottenham often look quite staid against teams who sit deep against them, who don't give that space behind to attack. And you think get against Newcastle, who play a 4-3-3. If you play that back three, then it's effectively three picking up one. The wing backs have to pick up the Newcastle wingers. So if it is 3-4-3, the two in midfield, the 10 centre midfield for Tottenham, are going to be overmanned by the three of Newcastle. So I mean, clearly you can fiddle that around. You can push the wing backs more into midfield to counter that. But that then means your back three has to be incredibly well organised, that one becomes the covering defender and one picks up the winger, and that won't be constant who's doing that. So and then you've got the issue that you've got to do a huge amount of work through if it's a 3-4-3, through the two wide forwards to pin in the Newcastle fullbacks. So it would seem to me for this game that a 3-5-2 would make more sense, just to prevent that issue getting overmanned in midfield.
Yeah, Ben, on the selection, you could argue that Tottenham's best team, best 11 when everyone's fit, doesn't include anyone that they signed in the summer at the moment, which is maybe a little bit of a concern. And Jed Spence came on for a brief cameo last night. Emerson Royale suspended at the moment. Doherty's largely done okay for Spurs. But if you look at that 11, if you pick the best one, I don't think any of the summer signings are in there at the moment.
I think there's an argument to be made that Longley would be in there ahead of Davies. I think Longley's better at sort of his distribution is of a high standard of Davies, but then Davies has the being a left back by trade, he has that ability to kind of cover out towards the left, which Longley doesn't really have. And Perisic as well out on left wing back, you could argue he is maybe better at getting the ball into the box than Sessegnon is at the moment. but there's not much in it. So, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a Spurs fan that would really argue your point, because, yeah, I mean, the summer signings don't feel like they have the summer signings just don't feel like they can make that impact that many thought they would when they first joined.
Yeah, because a lot of people, myself included, said Spurs had won the transfer window, Jonathan, but I'm starting to get vibes of frustration again.
Look, it was a squad that lacked depth, and it now has a bit of depth.
Yeah.
So it has improved that. I don't think the wing-backs situation has been resolved at all. I mean, I think that's an area where Spurs are notably weak at the moment. And then, Richarlison, it's been odd that when he's come on, he's looked lively. And so you had that spell the first few weeks of the season when you thought, well, he's playing better than Son. Maybe you play Richarlison instead of Son. But you think, well, Son was, top scorer last season. You don't really want to be leaving him out. His partnership with Kane is so good. But you need Kulusevski for the balance. So then it's, well, where does Richarlison actually fit? Unless there's an injury. And then even if there is an injury to Kulusevski, we're now thinking, well, maybe that front three doesn't work anyway. So I guess that's the dangerous signings, that they can seem good in theory, and then until you actually use them in practice, you don't quite know how players will fit together.
I suppose it is early days, and Conte has taken his time integrating some of the new signings into the team, so there's still plenty of time for them to come good. And Jonathan, Harry Kane started the season. He didn't score last night against Manchester United, but he's been pretty good in front of goal. His stats are right up there, one of his best starts to the season, if not his best start ever, Harry Kane. Because Haaland scored so many goals, I suppose his numbers have gone under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And I mean, he's got 9 and 11, is it? But I mean, three penalties of those 9, I think, maybe even 4. So he's famous. He doesn't score goals in August. Well, he had a much quicker start than usual in that regard. And again, we're talking about England and the World Cup. I don't think Kane's form is not a worry for the World Cup.
No,
at the moment. I mean, he's got 7 more games to get himself injured in, but for now. He's somebody you feel relatively secure in. So he's not doing what Haaland's doing, but nobody is. He's had a very efficient and good start, and in another year we'd probably be raving about him. But Haaland, quite understandably, overshadows all else.
Yeah, someone else who's had a good start, Sven Botman, Ben. Again, maybe going under the radar a little bit. Newcastle have only conceded 6 goals in the 8 games he's played. They're keeping clean sheets, and Botman, again, he looks an astute summer signing.
Yeah, there was the concern that maybe his lack of pace would be found out in the Premier League, but he's slotted in seamlessly in that Newcastle defence. I mean, it was out of chance that he got his opportunity in there because of injury to Matt Targett, so that forced Eddie Howe to put Dan Bardell at left back and Botman in there. But since then, he and Newcastle haven't really looked back. I mean, they've only conceded more than 1 goal in 1 game that he has started, and that was that crazy 3-3 draw against Man City. So they do have one of the best defensive records in the Premier League. They do this season, if not, one of the best this year. And as you say, his form for Newcastle has gone under the radar just because Newcastle have been picking up points. A lot of the focus has been on Trippier being excellent at right back again, but a key reason for those clean sheets and keeping opponents out is because of Sven Botman.
Yeah, I'd say they're quietly going about their business, Newcastle, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, they had that spell where they were dominating games but not winning them. And then the Chalobah sending off for Fulham sort of sparked them into life. Brentford had that dreadful game against them. But I know they only won 1-0 against Everton last night, but they were much the better side. That could have been 2 or 3-0 quite easily. So I think there is a sense, and partly it was injuries. I mean, getting Callum Wilson back makes a big difference. Sam Maximan's still out. But Almiron's playing really well at the moment. Guimaraes had a slightly slow start of the season because he was playing, maybe not a slow start, but he was less involved in creating chances because he was playing deeper. So yeah, I think there is a sense of things sort of falling into place now. And when you draw a lot of games early in the season, it can go either way. If you suddenly follow that up with 2 or 3 defeats, everybody's they've only won twice in the last 12 or whatever. Well, it's now they've only lost a couple of games so far this season. So, I mean, this is a test for them, obviously, but I was starting to think, are they going to think Eddie Howe, by sorting out the defensive issues that we thought he may have, that he had at Bournemouth, has he lost something going forward? but it feels over the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks so that balance is returning as players are returning from injury.
Is it a case for Newcastle now of just getting to the World Cup in and around the top 6, Jonathan? Because they have got injuries. You said it's about St. Maximin. I think Isak's ruled out until after the World Cup now as well. Is it just a case of continuing to go quietly about business and just getting to the World Cup in contention in and around the top 6?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess the question is, what is their ambition this season? And I guess the absolute height of their ambition, I think, will be 4th. But that would take an extraordinary number of things to go right and other teams to fail. I think what you can say is now they do have a depth of squad that they can handle 3 or 4 injuries, which they have been dealing with this season. So yeah, I think they would probably realistically they're looking at Europa League qualification, and so yeah, they to secure that, obviously you need to be top 6. So it's knocking around the top 6, and I think also there's a psychological issue with the top 6 that we talk of the big 6, and then Newcastle as a 7th force who may join them. So in a sense, anything above 7th is overperforming. They're shaking up the established order. So yeah, 6th or 7th at Christmas, and then I don't know if they would want to bring in a couple of more players in January, but maybe isolate a couple of. I mean, the fact that they're without Shah and Kraft at the minute, whether they think they need an extra defensive presence, I don't know. I think the back in midfield, they're pretty reliant on Shelby. His injury record isn't great. So there's a couple of areas there you think, maybe they could upgrade slightly. But yeah, 6th or 7th at Christmas, and then see if they can kick on to 5th or 6th, and who knows, maybe even higher.
Sounds good. As Newcastle trending in the right direction, as I like to say, and I've already used that term twice in this podcast. Ben, can I have a non-biased score prediction from you, please?
I'm going to have to go for 1-1 again. Can't see Tottenham getting a win.
Okay. I can see Tottenham getting the win. I'm going to go for 1-0 to Tottenham. Jonathan?
Well, Spurs have won every home game so far this season, haven't they? But they were so poor against United that I think I'm also going to say 1-1.
1-1. Very good. Let's move on now then to the Just a Minute section. And Jonathan, you're up first. European Cup winners galore here. Nottingham Forest against Liverpool.
Yeah, a massive game from 40-odd years ago. But
those were the days, and I wasn't even born. But they were better days.
They were better days, yeah. Not because you weren't born, just to be clear.
No.
But yeah, I mean, Forest, I think they have improved slightly recently, but still no win since that first home game of the season. At least the last 3 games have yielded 2 points and just 2 goals conceded in that time, which, given how they were leaking goals before that, perhaps suggests some kind of structure is being imposed. Though they've only scored once in those 3 games. Injuries with them, it's very hard to know how significant they are, because it's very hard to know what team they'd like to be playing. But they have got 5 players out. Liverpool, I think, slowly improving up to 7th, 3 wins in a row since the defeated Arsenal. They've got a huge number of injuries still. Diaz, Matip, Keita, Kanate, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Arthur Melo, Jota. Short of options up front, but I think they should still have too much for Forest. So I'm going to say 2-0 to Liverpool.
2-0 to Liverpool. I'm going to go for 3-0 to Liverpool. Ben?
3-0 Liverpool as well.
3-0 Liverpool. Very good. Ben, your first game to look at is Everton against Crystal Palace.
Yeah, Everton secured their Premier League safety in this game last season. Second half goals from Michael Keane, Richarlison and Dominic Calvert-Lewin earned a 3-2 win over Palace. The Toffees are unbeaten in 7 at home against Palace now, a run that did start back in 2015. And they've won 4 of their last 5 games against the Eagles at Goodison Park. However, Frank Lampard's side do have the second worst home record in the Premier League this season, collecting just 5 points from 15 available, and they've scored just 3 times at Goodison Park, with their issues in front of goal proving a hindrance when you consider they have shipped just 4 times in those 5 games. Lampard is without long-term absentees Patterson, Townsend and Godfrey, but Anthony Gordon returned from a ban in midweek and should keep his spot, or Dominic Calvert-Lewin is back to fitness, which is a huge boost as they look to right their wrongs in front of goal. Palace made it 2 wins from 3 as they came from behind to beat Wolves on Tuesday. Second half goals from Eberechi Eze and Wilf Zaha secured all the spoils at Selhurst Park. Patrick Vieira is keen to end Palace's poor away record at Everton's expense, with the Eagles yet to win in any of their 4 games on the road, drawing 3. Vieira does have a handful of injuries to contend with for this one, though he does have his core players available here. He's unlikely to make sweeping changes to his flavoured 11 despite playing 3 games space of a week. And I'm going for Everton 1, Crystal Palace 1 in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go 0-0. Jonathan?
Also 1-1.
1-1 draws all round. Jonathan, just quickly before we move on to your next game, it looks like Eze may well be in Southgate's preliminary squad for the World Cup. What do you make of that?
Well, I wish he'd been in the squad earlier, but look, he's clearly a really, really good player. He's clearly playing really, really well at the moment. I think this is the problem with the schedule that we've already talked about. That there just hasn't been time to try players out in friendlies or to experiment. That England's last 6 games have all been Nation League Group A games against high-class opposition where it's difficult to break players in. But on form, there's no reason not to pick him. Is it an area of England that's particularly short? I wouldn't necessarily say so, but I guess get him in the preliminary squad, have a look at him, and then make your decision.
Everyone's got a chance, even we've got a chance, because you can name up to 55 players in this squad, Jonathan, which just feels like such a random.
Just to be clear, I am not one of the 55 best footballers in England.
You may well be.
If Gareth Southgate picks me, he has to go.
Sometimes you just want people who are good in the dressing room. You may not.
I'm not that either. You met me.
You were Ronaldo, poison in the dressing room.
Well, I'm not a Ronaldo, but yeah, I'm not an easy bloke. Come on,
I'm not going
to make anybody have fun, am I?
I have fun every I have fun every Thursday with you, Jonathan.
Well,
I've never had any problems with you.
Well, yeah,
I'm alone though.
You've never actually met me though, have you? So
that's true.
Yeah,
one day. That day is coming soon. Manchester City v Brighton for you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for De Zerbi that he's taken 2 points from his first 4 games. You're sort of saying, he hasn't won a game yet. Was this a poor appointment? But he's played against Liverpool and Tottenham, so 2 of the big 6 in those games. Then against Brentford and Forest, they just couldn't score. So they've actually had the better XG in all 4 games. And against Forest, it was 2.1 to 0.2, and they ended up drawing the game. So this classic Brighton problem, not being able to score, just can't be shaken off. And Danny Welbeck and Solly March are the 2 worst culprits for that, for underperforming the XG. They're without Moda, Matoma, and Colwell. Obviously, Mwepu has been forced to retire. City, I think they were pretty stung by Klopp's comments last Friday. I think Guardiola certainly looked pretty fraught on the touchline at Anfield. I think there's a possibility they're slightly rattled by the way things have gone. I think it's a real shame that their game against Arsenal was called off. I think that could have been fascinating if fraught Pep against a rampant Arsenal. Few injuries, Stones, Phillips, Walker out for them. And they are now 4 points off the top, so maybe a bit of pressure. But they did win both these fixtures last season by 3 goals. I think they might win this by slightly less than that. So I'm going to say 2-0 to City.
3-0 City.
3-0 City. I'm going to go for the big 4-1. I am 4-1 to Manchester City. Ben, Leeds v Fulham up next for you.
As noted, we are recording on Thursday morning, so Fulham are yet to play this week.
I can tell you they'll probably get 3 points.
Yeah, of course they're playing Villa, aren't they? So
yeah.
Anyway, Leeds and their defensive issues were documented last season, but Jesse March has tightened them up, particularly at home. It's quite surprising. No teams conceded fewer home goals than Leeds this season. They shipped just 3 times, which is a very good record when you consider that they were conceding about 3 goals a game last season. However, they have failed to win their last 3 at Ellen Road and lost to Arsenal at the weekend. Marshall's side are unbeaten in 5 against Fulham and secured an entertaining 4-3 win over the Cottagers in this game last season. Marcus Silva's side have now lost 3 of their 5 away league matches in 22-23. However, all 3 defeats did come in London derbies, and they've actually picked up 4 points from those 2 games outside of the capital. So they do fare better when they don't have the London derby. If they pick up the 3 points tonight, that's a huge boost ahead of this game against Leeds. As I said, we're recording before this game. But it'd be interesting to see how they get on. I think there's going to be goals in this one. So I'm going to go for Leeds to win 3-2.
1-1 again.
I'm going to go 2-1 to Leeds. Yeah, 2-1 Leeds. Jonathan, Southampton against Arsenal.
Well, classic Southampton this week, that just when you think the pressure's becoming intolerable in Hasenhüttl, just when you're about to write them off, they end up winning against Bournemouth as well. They've been in great form. Che Adams looked brilliant centre forward for parts of that game. So they're now up to 14th. I don't think the issues there are sort of solved in any sense. I think the squad is still very young. And they possibly do lack a bit of leadership and experience. A lot of injuries as well. Livramento, Bella-Kotchap, Lavia, Walcott, Jallo, all out for them. Arsenal, had to play PSV on Thursday, which is why this game in City was called off. You think they probably would have wanted to play that game, just given their form, given that City might have been rattled. But on the other hand, they've been able to rest players. Zinchenko and Smith Rowe both out. They've won 9 of the first 10. Last 4 teams to do that went on to win the league. And they do have a 4-point lead to protect. Arsenal won 3-0 at the Emirates last season, but lost 1-0 at St Mary's. I think it could be tight this time, so I'm going to say 1-1 again.
2-1 to Arsenal.
2-1 to Arsenal. I was going to go to 2-0 for Arsenal. 2-0 to Arsenal. Sorry. Next up for you is the thrill ride that is Midlands football at the moment. Ben, it's Wolves against Leicester, 2 struggling outfits.
Yeah, again, Leicester play tonight, and remains to be seen whether they'll actually win again, but we'll see. Wolves actually managed a goal in midweek, and Adama Traore header no less, which is impressive considering he's only had 3 shots with a header in his Premier League career. They have only scored 5 times in 11 games this season. However, they're also unable to hold out for the 3 points as they lost 2-1 at Palace. They have now lost 4 of their last 5. They continue to struggle at the wrong end of the table. Ryan Ait-Nouri missed the midweek loss, and interim boss Steve Davis deserved praise for Hugo Bueno for his performance. Even if the former is fit, Bueno may keep his place at left back. However, their quest for goals are hardly aids the absences of Jimenez and Neto, among others, hardly aids their quest for goals. Leicester remain stuck in the relegation zone after 11 matches as pressure continues to mount on Brendan Rodgers. They have lost all 5 matches on the road this season, but their trip to Molineux presents with a perfect chance to turn their away fortunes around. That said, the Foxes haven't gotten the better of Wolves at Molineux since a 2-1 win there back in 2006, and I'm going to go for a 0-0 draw.
0-0, 1-1 from me. Jonathan?
1-1 from me.
1-1 from you as well. Jonathan, you're finishing with Aston Villa against Brentford. Could be a pivotal game for Steven Gerrard, if he's still there by the time that game comes around.
If he's still there after the Fulham game tonight. So before the Fulham game, Villa had just 1 win in 7, only 4 goals scored in that spell. I think that narrow formation that they play, that 4-3-2-1, really just isn't producing goals. I think that's a huge issue. And what makes that a really, really big issue is that is the Gerrard default. It's not that that's something he's just been using recently. It's that is the way he's gone about things throughout his career. And if that has been worked out by the Premier League clubs, then that is a big problem. A load of injuries for Villa as well. Kamara, Dean, Augustinsson, Diego Carlos out. Doubts over Mings, although given how he played against Chelsea, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Brentford, again, it's very typical of them. They had the heavy defeats against Arsenal and Newcastle, but they've come back with a very good win against Brighton, had a better 0-0 draw against Chelsea midweek. They're without Janssen, Slakosha, Hickey and Norgard. It was 1-1 this fixture last season, Brentford winning in London. I'm going to say 1-1 again. Exactly
the same, 1-1 for me. Ben?
Same, 1-0.
1-0, full house of 1-1, and Villa's record against Brentford is absolutely pathetic over the years, by the way. Let's finish then with West Ham v Bournemouth, Ben.
Yep, West Ham's dire record at 4 of the big 6, which is Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man Utd, continued in midweek as they lost 1-0 at Anfield. They were slightly unlucky in that Jarrod Bowen saw his first half penalty saved by Alisson, but they were really unable to test Alisson beyond that effort from 12 yards. That defeat ended a 5-game unbeaten run in all competitions, but back on home turf, where they've won 4 on the trot, they'll feel confident returning to winning ways. Summer signings, Naif Aguirre and Lucas Paqueta are both set to miss the welcome of Bournemouth, but they do have some depth there in both positions, so not a huge loss. The Cherries' unbeaten start to life under Gary O'Neill due to a close on Wednesday night as Bournemouth fell to a 1-0 loss in El Clasico. That shouldn't take away what has been a solid start to life by O'Neill as Bournemouth boss. Away from home, Bournemouth are unbeaten in 3, drawing their last 2 as they seek to quickly bounce back from that 1-0 defeat to Southampton. Bournemouth have lost their last trip to West Ham, falling to a 4-0 defeat in this last time they played at the London Stadium, but don't have the worst record in East London, losing just 2 of their last 5 trips to the Hammers. However, they do need to tighten up defensively, having conceded 18 times on the road, which is the second most at the time of recording. It's also worth noting that 9 of those came in the loss at Liverpool. I'm going to go for West Ham to win 2-0.
I'm going to go for another 1-1. Jonathan?
Also 2-0 to West Ham.
2-0 to West Ham. Very good. Have we got any idea on the league table at the moment, Ben? How we fared last week or not?
Jonathan is top with 35 points. followed by Who Scored 27, and then Dan, you're on 24.
I'm stinking out the joint, just like I am.
That's a huge. Hang on, wasn't I 1 point ahead last week? And suddenly,
Yeah, what's happened? You sure Josh stitching me up before he left?
I mean, I think I got 12 points last week, which would
I get no points.
And Dan, you got 2.
That'll explain.
That'll explain it. Yeah,
I may as well have got 0 points. Okay, some work to do there. I wasn't expecting that. Start the day with a bang. I'm terrible at fantasy football at the moment as well. Great, bottom of the league in everything that I'm doing. Superb. Jonathan, pleased with that? Probably as pleased to see me struggling as you are to be top.
Well, only because I see you as my main rival for this crown.
Oh, unlucky who scored. I'm not at the moment.
Well, yeah.
Anything.
But I mean, this week I've gone for 7 1-1s and 3 2-0s. So, like, if that comes up, then it's a funny set of fixtures.
Had I known how badly I'd done last week, I may not have been so gregarious with my predictions this week, but we'll see how it goes. Some serious ground to be made up. And that does us for this week's edition of the Edge of the Box podcast. If you are enjoying them, please, if you could subscribe with your post notifications on, that would really, really help us. We'll be back next Thursday to preview the weekend's Premier League action like we always do. Thanks to Ben, thanks to Jonathan, and as ever, stay safe.